Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. Now first of all, if I sound a little weird or you get some weird noises, it's because I caught a cold. The weather in Belgium is quite crazy. 10 days ago we had a heat wave, 35 degrees Celsius, stuff like that. All of a sudden everything switched back. We now have rain, 20 degrees, and of course in the transition I was probably outside for too long in too light clothing, just t-shirt, and as a result now I caught a nice cold. I've got problems with my ears and with my nose a little bit. My throat is doing alright, so I'm hoping to be able to do this EVE Talk in one go. So let's get started. As always, we are here for the market and we'll start with Plex. That is not good news at 55 seconds. There we go. Plex broke 3 million in a pretty sustained way here, but of course we do want the filters on. Let's go like that. But in Jita, Plex broke 3 million. You can see the clear ascent here once again, straight to 3 million, straight through that and just a little bit above it. There is maybe some hesitation to be spotted at the tail end, but this is of course a very high price, 1.5 billion for the old Plex. Extremely costly at the moment, 1 year high as well. Volumes wise, there's a little bit of an increase in volume. It's a little weird that Plex can still maintain this kind of momentum despite the fact that some Plex are dropping during the Rogue Drone event, or have been dropping during the Rogue Drone event. That just wasn't enough to stem the tide here. Lots and lots of ISK flowing into Plex. Now in the trade hubs, or the player owned trade hubs like Itamo and Perimeter, they're going for just below 3 million, so 2,985,000 ISK for one Plex. But the buyers, they are also up to 2,926,000, so very close margin. I think that there is still this upwards pressure at the moment on Plex, especially when they're traded outside of Jita. In Jita itself, it's way above 3 million now for the sellers, and for the buyers, let's take a look at that, 2,000,009, a little bit below that. So I think that at the moment you're basically getting pretty cheap Plex on the seller side of things on the player-owned, in the player-owned trade hubs compared to Jita itself. That's definitely where you want to buy the Plex if you're planning to use them. Very smart thing here I'm seeing as well is the quantities, 448. That's just not enough for like a full month, but that's something that you'll pick up decently easily here. So it's quite interesting that sometimes people put up 500, but stacks below that I think might go a little bit more easily. And yeah, big effect here of course. I think it's still partly the end of ghost trading, where legit skill point farms basically have to come back. They can do the math and see that if they're getting ISK out of that, they can basically restart their plexing of those ghost trading, not ghost trading accounts, but the skill point farms that do it in a legit way. I also read on Reddit that if you, let's say, have 3 fully trained PI characters and you turn those into skill point farms, then you basically don't need a lot of extra ISK, maybe like 100 million to Plex that entire account over the course of 1 month. And so there are still a lot of people that are basically have from the past, have all of these characters that are fully trained. They're putting them all in one account. They're now giving them +5 implants. They become skill point farms, and if you do the math on that, you just need a minimum amount of playtime from your main in order to keep that that account floating. That does mean extra demand for Plex, of course, and so as a result, at the moment, yeah, Plex very expensive, and of course the granularity here of Plex gives all of this a fake sense of being cheap. This is still only 3 million ISK for a Plex. I think a lot of players, especially newer players and alpha players, don't have the historic background of what Plexes, or the old Plexes for 30 days, so 500 of them, used to go for, and as a result this does create this dynamic of more demand because people pick up 10, 15 Plex, maybe for a skin, maybe for something else that they want. I think that they're basically doing that a bit more quickly at the moment as well. All of that culminates in a price of 1.5 billion in the old Plex prices and 3 million in the Cheetah market for the sellers for the new Plex. And for me, I'm hesitating. At this point, I think, sell a bit more of my own Plex stocks, because you can see here on the chart, we are once again at the 1 year chart. We're in a pretty much an unsustainable, I think, increase in price here in the last few weeks. So I think I may unload a couple of those at this point and hope for maybe a better chance to pick some up well below 3 million at some point. Not sure if that is going to happen, because at the moment, basically since the introduction of the new Plex, the rise has been pretty steady and maintained, but I don't think anything goes up forever. Next up we've got the skill extractors. That of course follows suit to 340 million in the trade hubs, and in Cheetah as well. Yeah, pretty close to one another here. And the bars are 332 million. So skill extractors, 340 million, something like that. And up in price, just like Plex, of course. Quite interesting. Next up, the multiple pilot training certificate. I think that's due to a special sale here. Volumes went up, prices went down. Fresh supply came in. They're now asking 1.2 billion for a multiple pilot training certificate, much cheaper than doing it on Plex. So I do think that if those sales end, that all of this will get picked up pretty soon. Another thing that needs to happen, of course, is that Plex needs to be maintained at this price range. But if that does happen, then I think over here you have probably a couple dozen really cheap character training slots that are available on the market, especially stuff that's below 1.2 billion. If you're planning to use that to train up a character, then this is what I would look into. For instance, you know, you hear now about this, the fact that you could float an account much more easily if you create next to your main 2 PI characters, and then you turn those into skill point farms. The best way to go about it, if you want to do that right now, would of course be to pick up some of these multiple training certificates, which are going for like 300 million less than plexing those characters. Start up the skill training plans, invest in the +5 implants, and then make that conversion. And yeah, you're in the skill farming business at that point. I think it still makes economic sense, of course, because of the extra demand of skill points that does exist in the game. But it's also something that the more you do this on larger scales with more and more accounts, the more you're flooding the market for skill points, and you're devaluing all of that as a result. So this is still all part of the sandbox, and there are some self-correcting mechanics in the market as well, I think. Next up, let's take a look at the skill injectors. Here are the large skill injectors. After dipping a little bit in price, they're back on the way up towards 750 million. You can clearly see the 5-day moving average crossing the 20-day moving average on the upswing again, and they are going for 744 million in the player-owned trade hubs. Go down to Cheetah, let's see if we can spot that, 770 million. That's quite a difference here between Itamo, Perimeter, and Cheetah itself for the large skill injectors. That's quite interesting. So on some violent swings here, like the downtrend here that is now coming back up, you do have some interesting business opportunities, I think, between buying one for 744 million or buying one for 770 million in Cheetah. That's quite a pretty severe difference. And the buyers are at 722 million, something like that. Again, also mostly in player-owned stations, and going down to 710 million in Cheetah. That's quite a wide margin. 710 for the buyers, 770 for the sellers, and the rest of it is being filled quite nicely in player-owned trade hubs, which I think there was also a calculation that I saw from someone explaining that while the margins are thin, if you do it with +5 implants and you grab you do your selling and your buying in the player-owned trade hubs, that's where you get the best possible margins. And so I think that, yeah, especially for the entire Plex category here, we will eventually see most of that market be taken over by the player-owned trade hubs. Although someone also mentioned that a lot of them do get blown up, and so wars do happen when it comes to owning that prime real estate around Cheetah. Keep in mind, you can't just plonk your own 40s are in there and say, you know what, I'm gonna become the new player-owned trade hub, you'll need a bit of backup in order to be able to try that, because there are active wars happening. You just don't really see that if you don't spend a lot of time in perimeter. And from the perspective of jumping into perimeter and then in Jita to, like, let's say, unload some of the stuff that I've made during the week and might be blueprint copies, I don't notice that because the overview is still basically filled with structures owned by players. So there we go. Here are the small skill injectors, also going up in price again. Also 5-day moving average crossing the 20-day moving average. These are currently going for around 150 million, a little bit more in Cheetah Station. Smaller market in the player-owned trade hubs at this point. I'm guessing, let's take a quick look at the volumes on these. 200, and here we're talking 700. Quantity, yeah, 5 to 700, probably something like that. For the large scale injectors, we are talking 4,000-5,000, sometimes even 7,000 a day. So the small scale injectors, considering the volumes, they are not yet fully developed and used that much by the market. Now, I do think that if large scale injectors go up in price too much towards $1 billion, that we'll see a bit more activity switch to the small scale injectors from alpha account new players and things like that. But at the moment, it looks like most people are still going for large scale injectors, which in my opinion gives a bit of credence to my theory that it's these items, the large scale injectors, that are going to replace Plex a lot as a store of value at this point. Although Plex are not doing badly either, of course, on this increase in price here. Moving on to some minerals at 1150. Let's take a look at those, and you probably saw it in the ticker below already. Titanium, quite interesting, above 5 ISK on the seller side of things in Jita. So here things become a little bit more tricky to read, so we're putting the filter back on for the sellers. Only in Jita they are selling for Titanium is selling for 541. Not bad, definitely quite a bit more than in the last few weeks and months. And the buyers are at 521 as well, 522 in the player-owned trade hubs nearby, and that's above 5 ISK once again. So Titanium up in price here. There must have been some impact from all of the nerfs that CCP did. I would say not just the Rorcal nerf itself, but probably the change to the respawning of anomalies in nullsec systems, I think may actually be where the bigger impact lies. Although CCP said that that shouldn't impact the numbers too much. For something like Titanium, I actually think that it means it's just not efficient to mine for that stuff anymore all too actively in nullsec, and so they're dropping that a little bit, giving us highsec miners a bit more bang for our buck when we spend time mining here, especially for Velspar, which is all Titanium, of course. So good to see Titanium back up above 5 ISK. Let's take a look at Pyrite. So after dropping off on a massive volume dump here, we're basically stabilizing around 5 ISK. We went as high as above 6. Let's take a look here. 593, approaching 6 ISK on the sellers again. 550, 547 for the buyers though. That's still a decently large margin compared to Titanium, but hopefully this is the start of an increase in price here for Pyrite as well. Would be good to see that above 6 ISK. The question is, will we have enough demand here at the current prices to make that happen? Are there still massive volumes left slugging around in people's hangars that might stop this? But if there is enough demand, it could go quite quickly, because you can see here 593 to 6 million units, 596 10 million units, 599 200 million units, but then it goes 6, 616, 625, 641, 645, 675. Then we could make our way to 7 ISK decently quickly on all of this. So quite interesting to see that Pyrite might be primed for a serious increase in price if there is no one ready to do this again here, dump another 10 billion units all of a sudden. Next up here we've got Mixalon, also turning around a little bit, quite interesting. 5-day moving average, crossing the 20-day moving average towards 70 ISK, currently selling for 70.20, and the buyers are at 69.36. Not a lot, not that much of a margin here. 0.50 for 5 ISK for Pyrite, 0.50 something like that for Mexelon as well. Very small margin here, and the reason is of course that the uptrend has already started, and so that margin has to close in order for also the buyers to basically be pushed up towards new sell prices, which are above 70 ISK once again for Mexelon. Not bad, and still definitely your focus if you're a HiSec miner. Isogen next could be important. It is. It looks pretty good here. 5-day moving average racing towards 20-day moving average, going back above 50 ISK for Isogen, 53 for the sellers, and 51 for the buyers as well. So here margin closing, and HiSec Minerals on the way up. It's been quite a long time since we've basically seen a bit of a uniform movement, but actually a shake-up of the HiSec mineral market. Noxium next, also moving up, unfortunately after dipping well below 400 to 330 ISK here, currently selling for 360, and the buyers are at 331. So my hope personally is that that we may continue to see this movement. Hopefully we'll be able to break above the previous highs. That would be pretty important for pyrite, for instance, head towards 7 ISK. Tritanium already did that, definitely a bit of a breakout here, and Isogen would be nice to see us go back towards 60 ISK. It may be a bumpy road, because as I've said, this here, stuff like this on the opportunities, massive volume dumps, you can see it in pyrite happening as well, are still probably in the pipeline. But my hopes are that they'll be lower and lower in volumes, and that will eventually have a bit of a seesaw movement up in price for HiSec Minerals. That would be an indication that CCP has done enough nerfs to the mineral output from nullsec, and that yeah, us HiSec miners have a bit more breathing room when it comes to the stuff that we're doing. So that's it for HiSec. Let's take a look at the nullsec minerals. Here we've got Zydrine, basically still moving sideways with a slight uptrend, definitely well above 1000 ISK at this point, but it's not doing so very quickly or anything like that. It's basically a slow upwards movement. Then 1040 for the sellers, 1036 for the buyers. There's probably just a bit more demand than supply at the moment in JITA when it comes to these nullsec minerals. Possibly some investments being made as well. Megasite next, very similar situation. After dipping towards 1000 ISK for a little bit, we came back towards 1250, and at the moment we are selling at 1220, buyers are at 1127. So we're here basically moving sideways in Megasite, and not really seeing the same thing that we see here in Zydrine. We clearly see the 20-day moving average slowly going up since March. For Megasite, we're basically still finding our current trade range, which is probably around or just below 1250 at the moment. I do think that if Zydrine keeps up a little bit, that will add to the imbalance in Megasite as well, where there's probably also a little bit more demand than supply that's going to form, and that one might actually find its way towards 1300 or above 1250 at that point as well. And then finally we have a Morphite that is basically also moving sideways below 10,000 ISK, slight downtrend at the tail end here, currently selling for 9,300 ISK, buyers are at 9,100, 9,200, close to that in perimeter. That's just one buyer of 20,000 units. Yeah, someone probably still trying to invest in Morphite. I don't blame you. If something big happens to the Tech 2 market, then Morphite might see a nice shot up, and buying below 9,200 is probably not that bad when it comes to a Morphite investment. So that's it for the minerals. Very nice to see a bit of an upwards movement in the HiSec minerals. Moving on to PI, 19 minutes. Okay, so for people that are maybe a bit newer to ETH Talk, all of these were picked by viewers when I decided to add a PI segment to ETH Talk. I think that they're basically both very accessible, but also very popular PI materials to create. I personally feel that a focus on refined planetary materials makes a lot of sense. It's what most players will in generally be able to obtain by themselves. It's really the more specialized guys that go for advanced PI materials like self-harmonizing power cores and things like that. And at that point, it's definitely not a solo venture anymore, or it becomes more of a buy and sell a game compared to just producing PI. So I do like personally that there's a heavy focus on the refined PI materials. A lot of these have to do with fuels, so that's basically PI materials that have very constant and strong demand. I would always advise, if you're starting out with PI, go for stuff like coolants, enriched uranium, mechanical parts, because you need those for fuel blocks, and you'll always find at least a baseline demand of them because they get used up I think much more easily than, let's say, self-harmonizing power cores, which are used to create structures for a large part. So yeah, I like this focus on refined PI materials, and all of these were chosen by the viewers. If you have suggestions, feel free to post those in the comments. I'll take a look at it, maybe I'll add it, maybe I'll switch it out for something, because for instance, rocket fuel has been this really weird chart for such a long time that I was constantly hesitating, should I keep this up here? Luckily we had this interesting movement there. But yeah, feel free to post suggestions, and I'll always try to keep an eye on those as well. Here are the construction blocks, basically settling a little bit below 12,500 ISK here. In the last week or so, definitely a bit of downward pressure towards less than 12,000 ISK. 11,600, there's just one seller that's going to be picked up pretty soon. So let's say 12,500 for the sellers, 11,600 for the buyers. Average price for construction blocks, to be honest. I would understand if you're starting to build up some reserves at these prices, but the real buy opportunities are probably well below 11,000 ISK if I look at where the chart has been in January. So I wouldn't be investing all that much in construction blocks just yet, but it's nice to see that we're basically primed for a cheap summer at this point because of all of this downward pressure. Consumer electronics next, that was still a winner a couple of weeks ago to a 1-year high of 18,000 ISK, basically settling down a little bit towards 14,500, 15,600 for the sellers, 14,000 for the buyers. Very wide margin. Look at the volumes here, that's actually still quite okay. 27,000 here, 31 here, and then on the buyers 26, 43, 62. Excuse me, so there is still pretty strong demand, but it's at 14,000 ISK. So I think that there is this downward pressure mostly at this point because the increase in price was not very sustainable, and still selling and even buying at 14,000 ISK, I would say, is still above average for consumer electronics, but the trend I think will be to go back towards 12.5k, which I would put as its average here. So it's still the right time to sell if you happen to have consumer electronics lying around. 10 days ago, 15 days ago was probably better. Coolants next. Pretty similar to construction blocks, except that the final movement here in the last couple of days has been up, but around 12,000 ISK here, so back on its average. 12,000 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. It's basically a normal price for coolants here. So you might be wondering, well, why shouldn't I be making the construction blocks? Why would you advise to make coolants, which go for less? Coolants, extremely easy to make. Gas planets, two very common extractor materials that are needed for that. So this is basically something that is really easy to set up, and you still have that baseline demand here that is basically pushing the price of coolants up to 12,000 ISK on average, rather than even lower than that on some of the other ones. I think test cultures is an example for that, 7,500, because it's pretty damn easy to make as well. So I would say, yeah, fuel related PI materials are still your go-to if you want to start out and get to know PI and not waste your time on the wrong ones, basically. So coolants, yeah, 12,000 ISK, I would say it's around average. I would here once again understand if you're not selling to the current market, but I still think it's not a mistake to do so. A real buy opportunity, we can see that from the start of the chart, is probably close to or even below 10,000 ISK. We'll see if it materializes this summer. Enriched uranium next, actually back on the way up to 17,000 ISK, 16,600 for sellers, 15,900 for the buyers here. Decent margin, but not that much, and actually again a bit of an upswing in the last week or so. Quite surprising to me. Enriched uranium is more tricky to produce than something like coolants, so you will always get a bit of a premium on that on the average price, but the breakout is what surprises me a little bit. The fact that 5-day moving average again racing right through the 20-day moving average, going back towards 17,000 ISK here. It's definitely above average on the price at the moment, and yeah, comes as a bit of a surprise. So enriched uranium, a winner this week, I would say. Mechanical parts next, again really easy to make on barren planets, around 11,000 ISK, a bit above that at the moment. 11,900 for the sellers and 11,000 for the buyers. I would say here we're again close to an average price for mechanical parts. Okay to sell, and I understand if you're actually starting to save up, but you can also see that we come from 9,000 ISK, so true buy opportunity is definitely lower than the current trade range, historically speaking. Oxygen next, still slugging around 400 ISK, so I would say yeah, actually it's only one seller at 400, next one is at 450, buyers are at 385. We're probably a little bit below average, but the sellers are probably close to an average price for oxygen. There's not much to say about that, except it's only a processed PI material that is used in fuel, so it is an understandably interesting market for a lot of people that can see this as a bit of a byproduct that they're easily making on some of their planets. There is this demand for that because it's used in fuels, but it's also of course an order of magnitude less expensive than stuff like coolants and mechanical parts. As a result, it's probably not one where you're gonna make a lot of money doing trades on oxygen, because it's so easy to flood the market with fresh supply. Basically it's really easy to produce massive amounts of these to flood the market, and so I don't think that this one is all that interesting, but I'm keeping it in here because it may be one that will give us a bit of a sense of the general vibe in PI, because of course it is a processed material that is used up a lot, and at the moment I must say I'm quite surprised. This is something that feels more natural to me compared to what a lot of the other ones have been doing. You can see here very strong April, May, June. For consumer electronics, coolants came off from a very strong February, March, but when it comes to oxygen, we're starting to see this lower summer basically here. You see March still pretty high, doing okay around 500 ISK most of the year. Here April, May, June, quite a bit lower. I'm seeing this as the summer slump. This is probably like my one sign that there is less activity, less demand in the game throughout the summer. Hopefully this will translate in lower demand, lower prices, and thus a buy opportunity later on in the summer months. Next up, let's take a look at robotics. A bit of a seesaw movement, but clearly the pressure is down as well. One thing to keep in mind, average price of robotics, I would put that at just below 100,000 ISK. So a couple days ago we did manage to reach that 99,300 on average, but here in the final couple days push back up above that. So the sellers are at 104,000 ISK, the buyers are at 99,500, just below that. So there is this pressure to go back towards its average. Robotics maybe a touch above average still, but definitely getting there. Rocket fuel next, as I've said, a pretty weird one that is currently trading a little bit below average, I would say. Close to 11,000 ISK here, so you see that this is a completely unusual one. Up until January, very stable around 12,000 ISK, very weird daily averages here all over the place. Then all of a sudden we shot up to a trade range of 15,000 ISK here, managed to maintain that for several months, and here in May, June again we give back all of that ground and currently trading pretty low at 11,000 ISK. Sellers 11,600, buyers 10,800. Probably a touch below average, but very close to it. Self-harmonizing power cores next. Interesting for people that want to prepare for the next set of structures in December. We can see here a bit of pressure going towards 2 million. 2 million for the first sellers, coming in with 1,000, and a bit above 2 million but that's only for another 1,000 units here. Then we're going for 1,950,000, where I think it starts to be interesting, and you can see that I'm not alone here. 2,000 as an investment, probably 2,000 here again. So this is where I think it's gonna start to be interesting. So the next few months, if oxygen is indeed a bit of a predictor for lower demand, lower activity, and hopefully a bit lower prices as well, then keep a close eye on self-harmonizing power cores for those dipping below 2 million. The buy orders are coming into view, the sellers are not that far behind. If it does happen, we could actually really go down in price and find ourselves in the right investment territory for a lot of these PI materials. And the fact that we're seeing this pressure here at the tail end for self-harmonizing power cores is very good news to me. You know, producers, I think they're staying active pretty easily at the moment, especially with the new Plex. As a result, we may still see a nice constant supply of PI, but if people drop off for the summer months, it happens every year, it's almost inevitable. And it makes sense. I don't think that that's any sign that the game is dying or something like that. It's just one of those patterns that we see again and again that might create that buy opportunity for PI this summer. Would be very interesting to see. Superconductors next here, up a little bit, but basically still on average 12,500. Yeah, 12,200 for the sellers, 11,800 for the buyers. Maybe a little bit below average, but considering the movement up here, yeah, definitely in the zone, I would say. Test cultures next. That's one of those PI materials that's also very easy to make. It's refined, but you can see that it's much cheaper than coolants because it is not fuel related. I think it's as easy to make, just not fuel related, so you have less of a baseline demand. Selling for 8,100, maybe 8,200 in a little bit, and then bars at 7,500 for test cultures. We can see dips here though going as low as 6,500, so be careful. I think it does make sense considering the rest of the chart where we come from. I think these were mostly structure launch related, these increased prices for test cultures, and so here again maybe a bit too soon to start investing in these, but I definitely would not be selling what I'm producing to the market right now. And finally we get wetware mainframes. That was going down quite steadily since October. You can see a bit of seesaw movement as people still sometimes wait it out a little bit, see a better sell opportunity, but then they're dumping even more, and so here we're definitely starting to see that pressure form. Last few days back up though, so I guess people are willing to wait a little bit. 2.3 million for the sellers, around 2 million for the buyers pretty soon. Yeah, 2.1 maybe on average here. Wetware mainframes, that's one that I should mention here again because I'm almost giving investment advice. Keep in mind this is all purely speculation on my part. Don't take that as gospel. Do your own research, decide on your own what you're going to do. But I find wetware mainframes to be very interesting because those became a real bottleneck when the first set of structures came out. So the Citadels, with the Citadel expansion, it was basically impossible to buy wetware mainframes right before and right after the Citadel expansion, and so they're probably the ones that will find the biggest imbalance if it does happen, and could, if that pattern repeats itself, see the most volatility as well. And so it's normal that it's still at 2.3 million. From that perspective, we're probably going to have a bit of a higher margin compared to the self-harmonizing power cores, but might also drop off. You can see that it's been dropping off quite steadily for quite a bit. If under pressure from the cheap self-harmonizing power cores, more production switches to wetware mainframes, we might actually see this one as the one to keep an eye out for the real buy opportunity and the biggest margins. That's my take on this one. So there you go, PI, very, very interesting market in my opinion. I think that this summer could be quite interesting. Moving on to Tech One chips, 3345, okay. Let's take a look at those. I don't think that there's I didn't think that there was much going to happen, but a jump up for the Abaddon up to 210 million ISK. 190 now for the sellers and 170 for the buyers. So it was short-lived, but what makes this quite interesting, look at that, this is November. These are before Ascension price. That's quite unusual. Seeing as titanium went up as well, maybe something is slowly happening in the mineral to Tech 1 ship market here. Not really seeing the volume trigger here, except for maybe this one, basically a buying out of ships, but that's like probably more than a week before the actual spike. Quite interesting to see the Abaddon yeah, basically coming back a bit to the forefront, which priced up to 200 million not that long ago. Caracal next, also a bit of a jump up, but already back under pressure, just below 10 million on average. 9.9 million for the sellers, yeah, 9.2 million for the buyers, maybe 9.3. 169 is quite a bit here, 2 jumps out, so that's quite a decent volume here when it comes to the Caracal. It's basically a cruiser, much easier to make than a battleship, but yeah, sellers slowly heading towards that 10 million mark again. Are we, together with the slightly higher price of high-sec minerals, starting to see the first signs of slightly higher prices in Tech 1 ships? It would make sense, of course. The margins need to be maintained. Govter also up a little bit, but really not by much, currently selling for 26.6 million, and the buyers are at 23.5 million. Not much to say here, definitely still below Ascension prices, so are the Caracals. The Abaddon here, quite interesting, lots of volatility, and peaks towards the Ascension prices. Ferox next. I think this one was requested last week, so I am definitely willing to add some interesting other things. We saw Ferox fleets flown quite a bit, I think Brave or Test, during the fight against the Excel Citadel a couple of weeks ago, and so it makes sense to take a look at those. Let's start here. 60 million at first at Ascension. Of course, we have the Ascension dip, that was inevitable, but yeah, indeed here highs up to 55 million here. Then this is the January to May time is probably the Rorcal, right? Constant pressure on the price because of very cheap minerals, but also peaking up back to 53 million here, and a slight uptrend in the 20-day moving average in the last month or so. The Ferox is basically still flowing very actively in nullsec, and so yeah, the difference in price, 55 million on average before Ascension, 50 million now for the sellers, 46.5 for the buyers. It's a bit less than most of the other ones, probably because it is still a very actively flown nullsec doctrine. So that's the Ferox. Pretty interesting suggestion here. Definitely this resistance after the initial Ascension drop here for the Ferox, managing to peak back towards average prices before, then the inevitable downtrend as the Rorcals were mining up a storm in nullsec, and then here a bit of a comeback as minerals are slightly coming back as well. Next up here we've got the Hurricane, basically flat at 45 million, and here again 55 million before Ascension. This is a much wider gap here, 46.5 for the sellers, 42.6 for the buyers, so 10 million difference for the Hurricane, only 5 million difference for the Ferox, because it's flown more often probably by important or bigger groups. Maelstrom next here, a battleship that's not really coming back, still going for another 50 million. Sellers are at 170 though, buyers are at 147. So it's basically the lack of demand, the very low volumes that on any interest, on any buying by a bigger group, probably maybe an investor, will cause massive volatility in the battleships at the moment. Just not happening in the Maelstrom. Megatron, yeah, a little bit of a jump up here towards 170 million. Before Ascension 180, maybe even, yeah, 180 let's say. So yeah, peaks slowly starting to get there. Unfortunately, of course, producers do flood the market. After that, we're back down to 155 for the sellers for Megatrons, 143 million for the buyers. So yeah, some volatility in the battleships basically is what I'm seeing, which is quite interesting. Same thing with the Prophecy, that's probably flown in nullsec as well, I think, from time to time. Very tanky battle cruiser. Here again, before Ascension, 55 to 60 million on average. You've got that slump, you've got a bit of resistance by the market, but then you've got this basically inevitable decline in prices from the Rorcals, and then here in the last month or so, increase in prices and a bit of volatility as well, probably on some volume buying. Prophecy is currently selling for 49 million and the buyers are at 46 million. Again, it's still not as good as what the Ferox managed to maintain, 55 to 50 million. The Prophecy 55 to 60 on average before, now currently probably just below 50 million. So still quite a bit more of an Ascension punishment for the Prophecy compared to the Ferox. Very interesting addition there. Finally here we've got the Scorpion as well as a battleship, slightly going up in price towards 160, before Ascension 180 though. Selling for 164, bars are at 155. But again, what we can see here though is a bit more volatility in the battleship markets. And finally we have the Vixor. That's of course a cruiser, a Gallente cruiser, very popular, not just in PvP. I think for maybe small gang PvP it's quite interesting, but it's also a very important ship, I think, for PvE for newer players. As a result, stable just below 10 million for the sellers, 9.6 million for the buyers. Yeah, maybe up just a little bit in price here. 20-day moving average going up a little bit, very close to the Caracal, whereas the Caracal would be a very popular PvP variant. The Vexor is a very popular PvE variant. So if you're looking for the volatility and the opportunities, it's probably going to be the Caracal, because it's actually more likely that a group buys up a huge fleet of Caracals all of a sudden, causing an increase in price. But at the moment, cruisers are not showing that volatility just yet. I guess they're not bought all that much. It is summertime, of course, and they're much easier to produce than the battleships. But yeah, the Abaddon here, that's a very nice little bit of volatility starting to show up in the Megatron as well. You can see it a little bit in the Prophecy and in the Scorpion too. So we'll keep an eye on that. If classic mineral prices continue to go up, we may see some interesting things happen in the larger Tech 1 ships as well. Moving on to the Tech 2 market, 4130. Like that, let's take a look at this one for volatility as well. Of course, the Tech 2 market, in my opinion, is always very interesting when it comes to trading. One thing to note, of course, between now and the winter expansion, a lot of stuff could start to happen, because of course moon mining will then be switched to an active activity rather than the passive moon mining we know now. This could have a major influence on the Tech 2 market. So I would say if you spot real buy opportunities, you might want to hold on to at least part of those for the longer term. I think it could be quite interesting. Here is the Ares, unfortunately settling at 23 million. We'd like to see this settle closer to 20 million for a buy opportunity, but at least we had a sell opportunity not that long ago. But here I'm basically, I think, going to start to look at some real buy opportunities for these Tech 2 ships. Here are the claws going down. Currently buyers are at 20 million. Lose these top 3 buy orders, go to 19 million, then you've got a really interesting price for claws, I think. The Crow next. Oh, maybe I should also mention this. So this again, this is speculation on my part, just a thought experiment, and it's still a little bit of a gamble, because you don't know exactly what CCP is going to do when it comes to the yields and the potential production of moon mining after the changes. So expect volatility, but it could still swing both ways. Of course, we could see higher prices because of the competition, the possibility to disrupt Gnostic mining and moon mining, but we could also see CCP deciding that they don't want to disrupt the Tech 2 market too much, and that they thus will increase the potential production in order to make up for the increased volatility from making it an active activity. So, you know, I would say if I'm spotting some really good buyers, I'll probably jump in on some of these, but it may be the wrong gamble to make as well. Next up here we've got the Crow, basically at a slightly higher price range than we would like as well at the moment, also a bit more tricky. But yeah, at least there is some volatility to be spotted, but we would basically like to be close to 22.5 million for a buy opportunity. We're nowhere near that. For a sell opportunity, maybe we're probably a little bit too late, close to 27 million. Currently Crows are selling at 26.4 million. It's still not bad, it's definitely a good price for the Crow. but for an investor, it's maybe we'd like to see it go a little bit higher. The Aries next, slightly going up in price, so this is not the kind of chart we want to see, of course, and yeah, I wouldn't make a move on this in my opinion. Here's the Flycatcher, is that a bit interesting? Nope, we do see this volatility, that was quite interesting. In December, that's probably a bit of a bug, and then here in March, that was quite interesting, but after that we basically settled above 60 million, which is both too low to sell and too high to actively buy. So the Flycatcher, unfortunately, we need to see this get flooded and go back towards 55 million until we invest in that. The Heretic, that was quite interesting, of course. So last week selling for 66 million. Of course, something like that doesn't last very long, so now we're on our way down. But 45 million to 66 million on the chart. On the chart highs and lows, that's quite a big difference here. Currently selling for 56 million, buyers are at 53 million, so we're on our way down from a very high point. The question is, will we go low enough to find a buy opportunity? Hopefully so, but right now, again, not the right time. The Hound, nice little jump up here, so 20.5 million, let's say, jumped up to 25 million, not bad, 25% increase here, about a quarter. Currently back down, of course, to 22.5 million, buyers are at 21. So again, the Hound, not where we wanted for an investment, but showing some volatility, showing some signs that you can make some trade money in here. Again, 25 million, not so bad. Same with the Aries right here. The Claw, not so much. So yeah, the Stealth Bombers and the Interceptors, I think, are where the action could lie, but this week so far, not really any buy opportunities to be spotted. A lot of them are basically coming off of a peak here. Malediction next, don't really like this one too much. You know, the seesaw of massive oversupplied pattern is showing up here at many different price ranges, and we're basically just below 25 million. Yeah, 24.5 million for the sellers, 100 here, 100 here, 100 here. Way too much supply, buyers are at 22 million. It's just not really the right place, right? You're oversupplied, but you're not at a low point for the chart. So this mark is probably being manipulated a little bit, I think, when you start to see this pattern here of median daily price being the exact same thing for almost a week on end. So no, Malediction, I would make a move. I would need to see this drop below 20 million basically on all of this extra supply before I would make a move. Manticore, a little bit of volatility. Yeah, here that was a buy opportunity, right? We dropped off towards 23 million, even 22.5 on the median daily prices. As a result, we went back up to 26.5 million. That's nice volatility where you can make some ISK, of course, and we're on our way back down from that again. So we went up, we're on our way back down. We're not where we want to be on the chart, but a couple of weeks ago here, early June, this was the right time to pick up a couple of really cheap Manticores. Currently selling for 25, buyers at 23. So again, not high enough, not low enough, but it's of course, volatility does mean that sometimes you're in between the movements. The Nemesis next also saw a peak early June up to 26 million, on its way back down. Let's hope that we can get buyers below 20 million. They're at 20 million, so here again a bit of patience. We may drop off below that and try to pick them up below 9. Yeah, if all of these could be gone, that's where you want to make your move. 18.5 million, very cheap Nemesis. So still we need a bit more patience. Purifier next, again we see the low point here when I saw at 21 million, when as high as 28 million. Not bad, some volatility, but we're recovering from that and we're in between the two, so that's a big no again. And then the Saber, unfortunately a slight tick up as well. And well, this was not bad. Right here, look at that. 51 million, then peaks back up to 65 million. That's what we want to see, of course. Unfortunately, the bad news is you're seeing this pattern here again. So there must be massive supply in numbers. It's not that much. Well, this is, of course. These 10s here are a bit disconcerting. So there is, I would say, an attempt at manipulating the Saber market, but I think it's small enough that it can sometimes escape the grasp of those manipulators. So here again, yeah, not the right place, but let's hope that a buy opportunity forms. So there you go, the Tech 2 market. Not really any big sell opportunities, definitely not a lot of buy opportunities to be spotted this week, but there is still some volatility, and at this point I must say I would mostly be looking out for those very cheap ships when when the chart goes to the lowest price points, then try to pick some up at the buy orders, but keep that high horizon, because the disruption to the Tech 2 market with changes to moon mining is definitely starting to loom on the horizon. So that would be my philosophy when it comes to the Tech 2 market. Next up, Tech 3 market, 50 minutes. Okay. Let's take a look first at the destroyers. So a little bit of volatility in the Confessor. We had a sell opportunity back at 40 million. We're probably recovering from that a little bit. Yeah, 36.9 million for the sellers, 34.1 for the buyers. So the people that bought at like 30 million here, you probably a little bit late, but you're still making around 20% profit at the moment, trying to sell those Confessors. The Hecate next also went up in price a little bit, and we're recovering from that. Currently selling for 35 million. The bad news, 420 here, 200 here. There are some big players that are trying to unload their tactical destroyers. So the bad news is sell opportunities don't last very long. The good news is, of course, these guys, if they become a bit overzealous, might crash the price very quickly, creating a new buy opportunity. It's good at least to see a little bit of volatility back. Here's the Jackdaw, so that one went up to 40 million, currently 39 million. Not that much being dumped here, so I would say the Jackdaw, if you still have some that you picked up at 30 or 29 million ISK, you can try to sell them at this point. And then finally we also have this Vapel, also went up in price a little bit, and we're recovering from that. Here the dumping is a bit more severe, 562, 255 at 35 million. So here again, probably wait and see, maybe we'll have a better buy opportunity later on. Now the cruisers, that's why we're here, of course. Let's take a look at the Legion. Went up in price and is stabilizing at 140 million, 145 for the sellers and 140 for the buyers. The surprising thing here, we're almost empty. So the Legions, the sell orders, not that many of them. Remember a couple months ago, oversupplied like crazy, dozens every day still being dumped despite where the prices were. So this is quite surprising. A massive buying has happened, and as a result at the moment Legion is selling for 145 million. So if you picked some up here at 110, you could try to sell those for a pretty decent profit. The Loki next, ooh, that's an incredible increase in price here. Yeah, basically 190 million for the sellers, 168 for the buyers. That would have been the right gamble to take. I was very hesitant to still make any calls on that one, because it jumped up on the announcement that it would be dual tanked. So probably I think the only ship in the game that would have bonuses to both shield tank and armor tank. As a result, people jumped on that a little bit, but probably too early. This is the time to sell. I think I have a couple Lokis lying around. I'm probably going to try and sell those at the current price. I bought them for like 110. Currently I can sell them for close to 190. So this is clearly the winner here so far. The Loki going for almost 200 million. If you have a couple of those, definitely look to sell. Now I didn't invest a lot in these Tech 3 cruisers. Turns out that was obviously a mistake here if you look at the Loki. But I bought at least a couple of every one of them, just in case one of them became very interesting and I would want to fly it myself. But I think here, the Loki, I'm gonna take my profit. Proteus next, also up in price on massive volumes, going currently for 159 million, buyers are at 145. So here again, yeah, the Tech 3 rebalance, creating a sell opportunity. And then here we've got the Tengu, went up in price, but is already on its way back down at the tail end here. That's not so good news. 132 for the 132 million for the Tengu for the sellers, 116 for the buyers. So the Tengu seems to be the one that's having most trouble. That was probably the most oversupplied as well. And the winner this week, I think, is obviously going to be the Loki, starting at 120, ending at 200 million. Yeah, probably close to 100% at the very peak here. So if you have a couple cheap Lokis that you bought at like 110, then definitely consider bringing those to the market. And what I basically wanted to show you guys is that there was a lot of expectation for nerfs. There is still a lot of nerfs, right? Go of Dubs losing a mid slot. A lot of people are not happy with that. But despite that, you can see that there is a sell opportunity that came from all of this. And so the next big change, right, this tick tree rebalance change was definitely a bit of a gamble, but it was a known CCP intervention that would create disruptions in the tick tree market. The next big one that we know about is of course the moon mining, and that is why for the extra product this week we're going to check on the advanced moon materials once again at 55 minutes. So take 2 ships and these advanced moon materials I think is where you might want to make your investments for in preparation of the changes to moon mining. And you can see the potential right here on this low-key chart. If you take the right one, we're talking a lot of profit potentially. So I think this was in manufacturing, materials, let's see, or is it in components? Nope. Need to remember planetary raw materials. Let's see here, reaction. Yeah, there we go. Advanced moon materials. So let's take a look at these here. Crystalline carbide, a little bit of a jump up, but currently selling for 192. Not too much on the market. Buyers are at 180 though, very low. I would say this could be interesting to invest a little bit of risk in. Again, keep in mind when investing in the markets, I definitely think the best way to go about it is to diversify and to not put all your eggs in one basket. So don't put billions of risk straight into some of these advanced moon materials. But this one seems decently low. A little bit of a jump up here a couple of days ago, unfortunately. So you may want to hold on a little bit. But the buyers at 180 could be interesting. Fermionic condensates, those are pretty high on some volatility here at the moment. So this one, let's take a look here, selling for 83,000 ISK, buyers are at 75,000 ISK. Currently, yeah, very high compared to where I was earlier in the year. I'm not sure if I bought any of these, maybe, but this is obviously not where we want to invest in right away. Maybe wait for a better opportunity that might form through the summer. Ferrite carbide, probably on average, it's currently under pressure, that's pretty obvious. Currently selling for 156.5, buyers less than 150. On the chart 150 is right here. That's not bad, but we could go a little bit lower. Here again, it's up to you to decide whether or not you want to start with your investments. Some people here, if I look at this, are definitely doing so from time to time. Ferrogel next, definitely at a slightly higher point here, but also under pressure once again. So this here could become interesting to keep an eye out for a buy opportunity. But at the moment, you might want to sell it if you still have it lying around. Fullerenes, definitely trading pretty stably at a higher trade range. So here I would say maybe not. Hypersynaptic fibers, oof, nice little jump up here towards the 1 year high at 11,200 ISK, selling for 11,135. Buyers are up to 11,000 ISK, definitely pretty high here as well. Nanotransistors also jumped up quite nicely. I wonder if I have some of those lying around. I think I may have them. 5,200 and 4,300 currently, so on its way back down after quite a jump up here. 4,200 for the sellers. Interesting. Average price maybe less than 3,000 ISK or something like that, so definitely pretty high as well. Okay, non-linear metamaterials also saw a big jump up to 30k from 20k mid-April, currently recovering from that. All right, interesting. Phenolic composites holding steady at a pretty high trade range of 1750, so again nope. Photonic metamaterials pretty high as well, again really high May month and recovering from that a bit. Plasmonic metamaterials, same thing, high May, recovering from that. Ceramic fibers, currently jumping up to a high 1 year high, you want to sell that stuff. There are Hertz Metamaterials, again strong May coming back down. Titanium carbide trading at a high trade range. Tungsten carbide, first one that's actually looking decently interesting on the downswing here towards 130. Let's see where the buyers are at. Yeah, around 130 here. This could be the only one that I would say, yeah, if you want to spend a little bit of risk in the advanced moon materials right now, take a look at the tungsten carbide. But the general vibe here is definitely that we had a very strong May month for a lot of these, and that we're basically in a recovery phase from high advanced moon material prices at the moment. Quite interesting, not what I expected, but if the summer can cause these this movement down that is in a lot of them to really push through and go back towards lower averages, then maybe we'll again see a right buy opportunity through the summer in preparation of the winter expansion. Of course, keep one thing in mind: we are talking the big players here. Moon mining is Nullsec Alliance stuff, and so the investors you're going up against will be other alliances, really big players, I think, here. So this one will be a major gamble, and the timing will be very tricky to do. I thought maybe here more of them would be at low price ranges like tungsten carbide, but it's definitely not very often. Crystalline carbonite still pretty low, tungsten carbide as well, but so many of the other ones are actually either mid or at the high trade ranges and stable or recovering from those high points. So yeah, not the right time, I think, to put a lot of ISK in the advanced moon materials, but definitely the time to keep a close eye on what's happening and to try and spot those right investment opportunities if you want to be ready for the next CCP intervention, which is of course going to be moon mining this winter. I think it could become very interesting, as well, the Tech 3 rebalance was quite interesting, just on a different scale. Of course, it's really only the low key, and we're not talking stuff that's being traded in the same scales, I don't think. So I think that yeah, moon materials could be interesting. I'll maybe like try to come back to those at least once a month or something like that, as it could be a very interesting market. And that's going to be it for this week, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you guys next time.